Claudia Puig. I'm on Film Week, in case you listen to that. And we have a bunch of really wonderful people, so I'm just going to begin introducing. Starting with Noah Segan, Trooper Wagner. Producer Ram Bergman. Editor Bob Ducsay. Rian Johnson, the composer. Steve Yedlin, the DP. And last but certainly not least, the man of the hour, Rian Johnson. I love this film so much. I've seen it 3 times. I urge you all to see it again and again. I love that this is more than an entertaining whodunit. This is about class warfare and privilege and immigration, and it feels so incredibly timely. So thank you so much. And as a Latina, I'm really happy to see a Latina heroine. And because it feels so of the moment, I know you've been working on this for a long time, so tell us a little bit about that process and why it feels so timely when you've been working on it for 10 years.
Yeah, I had that. Well, Claudia, thank you for doing this and being here, and guys, thank you all for being here so much. It was a real treat to be with these guys. This is really cool. So I had the idea for this about 10 years ago, and the idea being just kind of the basic structure of it, like a whodunit that turns into a Hitchcock thriller that turns back into a whodunit. And I had grown up reading Agatha Christie books. I always wanted to do that genre, the specific whodunit genre, and so I'd been chewing on it for a while. But I mean, one of the things that struck me at some point along the way is how cool it would be to plug a whodunit into like modern day America, because it is a genre that's uniquely suited for a lot of reasons, talking about some of the stuff that you said about class. It's a genre that by its very nature creates a little microcosm of society, whether it's like the mansion or the boat or whatever that everyone's on. It creates a power structure within that, with all the people leading up to the guy at the top who's going to get murdered. And then the suspects are a cross-section of that, so you're really getting the high to the low of this little microcosm that you've created. By its very nature, it's set up to kind of examine this stuff. And today, I feel like, and I'm a whodunit junkie, I love and I watch everything that comes out, but today you really only get these types of movies in the context of usually period pieces, and usually set in Britain, because they're Agatha Christie adaptations. So the notion of applying that stuff that this is inherently good at to the times we're living in, the place we're living in right now, seemed like it could be fruitful.
Absolutely. I have to ask you about the house, because I know it exists in Massachusetts, but how, Steve and Bob, if you also want to talk about sort of the role of the house in how it came about. Is it one house? Is it sets? All that good stuff.
Steve, I just want to get Steve and Bob talking. This is exciting for me. These guys never talk. Bob Ducsay, our editor, yes. What do you got?
I think the cameraman should, talk about the house more than the editor. How'd you like that?
Well, we had early discussions about should this be a stage so we can do all of this complicated camera movement that Brian wanted to do, but they found this amazing house, and we really wanted to capture the beauty of it and not have it be like all the disadvantages of a stage except and all the disadvantages of a location. So we did all of this work to make sure we really captured that beautiful steely light that the place naturally had. And then our production designer, David Crank, just did an amazing job bringing that place to life. So.
And our set decorator, David Schlesinger, who Schlesinger was the one who found, I gave him the reference of one of my favorite films, a 1970s version of Sleuth, and told him to go to town, and he found all of that amazing stuff inside the house. He was amazing, incredible.
The editorial offices were in the set deck department. on this movie.
That's right.
When we were shooting, and it was incredible being there every day because there were just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of beautiful props that you had no idea how they were going to be used, and then they show up in the house in the most beautiful ways. He did an exceptional job.
Yeah, imagine all this stuff in the house, but just laid out on shelves in front of Bob's office. So just headless
exactly
dummies.
how it was.
Yeah, next to knife sculptures, next to torture devices, and yeah, you were right at home. It was good.
Very much so.
All those details are so, I was wondering about in terms of shooting and editing, because some of it, you focus on them and it gives you a clue. And how do you keep from, not giving too much away when you're shooting?
Well, that's one of the fun things about a movie like this is that it is a familiar genre. It's something that has a certain amount of, everyone kind of knows what they're sitting down to watch to some extent. And because of that, I find you can, storytelling-wise, you can be really straightforward with it. You don't have to think about planting red herrings. Because I know when I sit down to watch something like this, I'm reading into everything that's on screen and trying to outguess it constantly. And so the audience is going to be bringing all of their own red herrings to the table. It makes our job actually quite easy. We can play it pretty straight, and they'll grab onto things we never would have guessed and go off in other directions in terms of guessing.
Your cast is so amazing, and I know Noah, you've worked with him on all of his films, Brick, Looper, Brothers Bloom. Did you envision some of these actors that we just saw on the screen as you were writing it, particularly Noah?
Only Noah. It's actually true. Noah and I, he was in we made the first movie I made, Brick, which Steve also shot and Nathan did the music for and Ron produced. Noah was in that, and we've been good friends ever since. I see Noah every day. It would be awkward if I didn't put him in. But other than that,
we will talk about it.
Yeah. Other than that, no, I've learned not to think of actors while I'm writing, or you get your heart broken because they won't be available. So no, I just wrote it and then we went about casting.
They're all so perfect. No, I wanted to ask you specifically about Officer Wagner, or Trooper Wagner, sorry. I don't know what the pecking order is, but you were the comic relief in a lot of situations. I think in some ways you stole some of those scenes, and Lakeith was a little bit more serious, and you were the more comic relief. So how did you approach your character?
I had a baby not long before we shot the movie, and I became like a goofy dad in that year, and I think that is the energy that I kind of had, and that I was able to bring to the movie. But I think with Lakeith's character, with Detective Elliott and Trooper Wagner, there's a left brain, right brain thing going on. I kind of think that in a way they're sort of the same person, just each having their own experience out loud. The thing that they're saying out loud is actually sort of the same, but one is sort of going about it in a very, mathematical, professional way. Another one is having a little bit of fun with it. But I do think that, on a movie like this, to be able to sort of be with the audience is really fun.
Yes.
To be a character with the audience.
Kind of the audience surrogate.
Yeah, as opposed to, all these other wonderful characters whose job it is to mess with the audience, right? That's what a whodunit is about.
Right.
Are these characters kind of always trying to misdirect the audience? And so I think it was really fun to kind of, carry that torch.
Noah's been primed to transition into goofy dad mode for years. Basically, since I've met him, we've just been on the cusp, waiting for an excuse.
Before you were a dad.
Yeah.
I am.
So you were the audience surrogate in a way, and I feel like Marta, or Anna's character, was the sort of moral compass of the movie.
Yeah.
Was that something you always, from the minute you wrote it, you had that in mind, or did that evolve as you wrote it?
Yeah, that was kind of the initial idea, was again, just in a dry structural sense, that the idea of, okay, if we're going to turn it into a Hitchcock thriller, that means there's someone you care about and they're threatened, and then we're all on this ride, seeing how they can get out of it. And the notion of this character of Marta, it was also very interesting to me, the idea of kind of doing the Columbo thing, but where you reveal the killer early, but I was like, well, if you could do that, but you're actually on the side of the killer, legitimately, not just in a creepy, Hitchcock, I don't know why I'm rooting for this person, but actually they were in the moral right. That means the mechanics of the murder mystery itself, the fact that we all know the detective gets his man at the end, that becomes the antagonist of the movie. That becomes a thing you're dreading, and that seemed really interesting to me, just in a genre wonk type way, I guess. But yeah, so Anna, but then we found, Anna de Armas. She just, I can't say enough about Anna. I think she's incredible in the movie, and she also, you have to really appreciate, like, to be able to step in the middle of a cast like this, not just the size of the stars, but the talent up there and the size of the performances everyone's giving, to be able to step with the confidence that she did into the center of that circle and really carry the movie the way she did. I just think she's extraordinary.
Well, speaking of the genre, it seems like you're paying homage to it, or it's almost a tribute to it, and I wanted to ask Nathan about your music, because your music walks a really interesting line in the score, in that you're not parodying, you are, it's a loving tribute, how did you arrive at what you
Yeah,
did?
Early on, Ryan and I were talking about some of the scores we love from the 50s and the 60s, these really like motif-heavy scores that are very melodic and thematic. Ryan told me kind of the first idea about the movie years ago, and I had kind of been imagining this, enclosed small score. And when we started talking about it, Ryan was saying, no, I think we want, the whole movie is going to be in one house. We want to blow it open. Like, let's do a huge orchestral score. But at the same time, we don't want it to kind of just be a blurry wash of sound in the background. Ryan was really precise about wanting to hear every voice. So I think we really leaned into that. He kept telling me, like, sharp like a knife. So, the string playing is purposefully a bit gritty, and everyone's leaning in and digging in to kind of dance around everything else that's going on with what the actors are bringing to the screen.
That's so interesting, and the soundtrack too. I love the use of Sweet Virginia at the end. It's the perfect note to end on.
Yeah, I have that in my head since I was writing. I'm not sure if it seemed right. It felt good to, like, I don't know, I knew from the start there was almost a good tonal goalpost to set. I wanted the end of the movie when you walk out to feel like you've just been to a party. And so I want everyone kind of smiling and bobbing their heads a little bit as I walk out the theater. And Sweet Virginia, where I could see in Ram's eyes, remembering how much we paid to clear it. But
Ram, it's like a party.
it's like a party though.
I delivered.
Well, Ram, you guys have worked together from the get-go, right? So, did you feel like this was kind of a return to the Brick Brothers Bloom kind of?
Absolutely. When we were in post last year, we basically discussed and said, Knives Out should be the next movie. We should go back and do something more intimate and smaller. So yeah, absolutely.
So the big question that many people have is, why would you go from Star Wars to this? I'm sure it's been asked a million times, so explain that.
This was just kind of the next thing that I wanted to do, I guess. Yeah, it was kind of as simple as that. It was. I think you get yourself in trouble if you kind of, try and calculate. Like, I'm not even sure what kind of calculation it would involve in terms of what would be the best thing to do next. To me, it was just, I wanted to tell this for years, and it felt like, this would be a really fun thing to do. Let's make a murder mystery. So, and it felt like, I don't know, not just a fun thing to do. It felt like right now I want to see this kind of movie. I wanted to just have a movie where I remember going with my family to see the Peter Ustinov adaptation, like when he played Poirot in Death on the Nile and Evil Under the Sun, and just feeling like these big all-star entertainments were the most fun type of movie that could exist. And so yeah, I don't know. I guess just because it was the movie that we wanted to see next, I guess.
Well, I think you tapped into what everybody wanted to see next, because it's done really well at box office too. So congratulations! Yeah, knocking on wood. Well, you seem to be that rare filmmaker that bridges the divide between, like, the big franchise movies that Martin Scorsese disparages, and he used the term the unifying vision of an individual artist, and you have that too. So how does one? I mean, there aren't many people who bridge that gap as artfully as you do.
Thank you. That's kind of useful. I don't know. Yeah, I think that Ram and I, first of all, I feel very lucky to be working with all of these guys. And, Bob cut Looper, and he cut this, and he also cut Star Wars. And Steve we've shot everything since Brick, our first movie together, and he also shot Star Wars. And Nathan did not score Star Wars, but he understood that John Williams scores Star Wars.
We thought it was time to give the young buck a chance. I think he nailed it, and I think he's got a great career ahead of him.
Yes. But between that consistency and honestly having, Noah had one shot where he was in Star Wars. Two. Check. But honestly, having Ram, whether the scale is huge or small, whether it was Brick or Star Wars, Ram is such a good producer and such a trusted partner through all of this that he manages to carve it out so that what's important about the process for a small thing is the exact same thing that's important about the process for a big thing. For myself, for all of us up here. And so it doesn't feel like a different thing when we're making a big movie, in the ways that matter at least. And that's something I realize we're very blessed to have, and we had a very blessed experience on the big movie that we did, and a lot of that I think is Ram.
That's great. So Ram, you have worked together a long time. Nathan, we should reveal you two are cousins. So you've known each other a long time. And Steve, do you have Ram and Steve, particularly all of you? Do you have a shorthand that you use with Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had people comment over the years that how do we know what we just talked about? Like people come up to me and says, "Did you guys say anything to each other just there?"
That must make it a lot more comfortable on set to know that you're seeing through it with his eyes, and I'm guessing you have a similar sensibility, probably.
Yeah, it's trust. I mean, you guys who have collaborators, that's the value of a long-term collaboration is more than just the speed of communication. It's the trust that even when you don't communicate, you know you're on the same page and you trust them to, do something great.
Yeah, I think for early on, the great thing is I feel completely comfortable showing Ryan the smallest little sketch. It doesn't take a lot to try to build it up to make sure he's not gonna kick it out the door, because I think he sees what it will be eventually.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part of it, is when you work with someone that you have the same notions, you have the same ideas, the same goal, that you feel very comfortable showing things, doing things that might not fit with what you've done before. And so the whole process of creating is very open and it's secure, which I think is the best environment to work in, and certainly the one that I think we all do, working with Ryan.
Well, your editing is so much a large part of this, and I would think that was an interesting challenge too, because at first it's got a kind of a more lighthearted, almost snarky tone. You're cutting from the people who are being interviewed, the family, and then when you get to Marta's character is a little bit more of a sincerity, I guess. It's a little more compassionate. So did you feel that there was with that tonal change, how did that impact your editing?
Well, I think always with anything that you're doing when you're editing, the movie and the characters and the screenplay are always speaking to you. And if you're true to them, it's never particularly complicated to know what to do, because that really is the main thing. And I think that the screenplay was so strong. It's such a Swiss watch precise thing that we could trust it, and we could trust the performances that we were getting. And so the whole process became about being even more precise in the choices that we made, because there were a lot of possibilities with the performances that were being delivered, both tonally and just generally what they meant to the characters. But again, because we had such a fantastic template, it was really wonderful to be able to really focus on details. And I think the precision of that really shows up in the movie.
Absolutely. The fact that it's so precise makes it so easy for us to enjoy and not even think about that. But what was the most challenging thing in terms of both writing and directing it for you, Brian?
Well, yeah, I mean, with the writing, it is, I think the most challenging thing was actually probably not, I mean, you put a lot of work into just trying to make sure the plot elements are as simple as possible for the audience to grasp, but that's just work. I mean, I think the toughest thing is probably making sure the other stuff works as well, especially given the limited real estate of a screenplay, to have all of that plot and all of that story, and to know the real thing that's going to make this live or die is kind of whether you're satisfied at the end when Marta takes that sip from that mug, and that requires laying a character's journey through it and laying a lot of other kind of stuff in there and making sure that lands. So keeping your eye on that, I mean, that balancing those two things, I think, was maybe the trickiest thing. Yeah.
Whose idea was Daniel Craig's accent?
What accent? He's happy to finally drop that British thing he does and go back to his that was in the script. I figured that I would give him I started writing that character and we had Poirot in my head too much, and so I started throwing all these terrible quirks at the character, and it became awful. He had like an eye patch at some point. It was just like a bucket full of quirks. And finally I said, this is awful. I swiped it all out, and I said, I'm just going to write the character very straightforward. I'll give him a southern accent so that he'll be kind of a fish out of water amongst these New England's, old money people. And then, and then Daniel and I collaborated on what that would be, and he found reference of Shelby Foote, the historian, who has a Mississippi drawl, and we kind of leaned into that, he just kind of figured it out and really found the character. Yeah.
That's fun. So I want to open it up to the audience, who I'm sure have questions. Yes, right there.
This is a question about the writing on Magda's sister. Throughout the movie, there's the notion that a wealthy family, my family's money is my money, whether earned or not. It will come down to me. But when you cut to Magda's house and the reporters are surrounding the family, the sister says, "Are we rich?" And she uses "we."
Yeah.
She doesn't ask Magda, "Are you going to share the money with us?" You imply that there's still the same notion that if we get the money is ours as a family, whether earned or not. Did you make the decision for Marta's sister? Did you think about whether she would say "we," like our money, or "your money, Marta, will we share?"
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. I was aware of that. I mean, it felt like the honest thing that somebody the sister's age would be excited about and say in that moment, but also, and the whole issue that it's not like, I don't know, and I don't. It's not a subtle film. I'm not going to dive into explaining all the themes in it and everything, but it's I do very much like the notion that the film is not saying money is bad, or the film is not saying this family is bad or something. The film is saying, no, there is this kind of cyclical problem and it's a very human problem. It's something that exists across the entire spectrum of the family. That was another thing that was important for me to say as someone who is, essentially kind of a Hollywood liberal myself, to self-indict also, and to look at myself and say, if I were in this situation and something I felt was mine was suddenly threatened, how much would I can, relating to that myself and using that to look inward. So anyway, I'm not making much sense here, but I am very much aware of what you're saying, and to me it was almost important to show that this is a human failing and not a specific failing to the family.
Okay, yes, right here.
First, Ryan, I'd just like to say thank you for The Last Jedi. It helped me through a very difficult time in my life, and I just really resonated with it, so thank you for that, and
Thank you,
while you
man.
guys are working on it. I wanted to know for each of you guys, like, what was a moment where you're like, this is so fun, getting to take this perceivably British genre and make it about America today?
I mean, for me, the most fun part was when we had the whole family together. He was asked, like, what was the most fun part of, like, translating this whole thing? When all those actors were in one room, and especially when we could turn them loose on each other and start them fighting. That was really fun. Especially when Michael Shannon started improvising. He improvised the line, "I'm not eating one iota of shit." That was a Michael Shannon. And also, he started shoving the cookies into Chris's mouth all of a sudden. It was like, maybe Harlan left you a glass of cold milk in his will, asshole. That was a shitty note, so you can't beat that.
I was interested in the immigration aspect too, because everybody kind of weighs in on that. There's of course the recurring joke of not knowing what country she comes from, but which I love. But the idea that where we are right now with immigrants is such a hot button issue. Were you afraid at all to sort of raise this, thinking about Middle America and maybe how that might play differently than it does here?
Yeah, you're always afraid whenever you touch something that. But I don't know. I come from a big family. My family's nothing like the family in this movie. They're lovely. They're wonderful. But I do come from a big family. And I also have a lot of people in my life who I love very dearly, who are on the exact opposite side of the political spectrum from me. And we get together and we argue, man, we go at it, but then we still love each other at the end of the night, and we still, it had that kind of tension. I think a lot of us have experienced over the past couple of years, and I think you experience it no matter what side you're on. So I mean, look, the movie, it obviously has an opinion, it has a perspective on the stuff in it, but at the end of the day, I also kind of trusted that, that we all could probably enjoy seeing kind of a ridiculous version of the thing we're doing every single day up on the screen, and that I kind of trusting that would feel good, and that wasn't gonna, I don't know, because, again, I'm not being very articulated.
I think in the end, one of the things that was really encouraging was when we screened the movie, one of the things that always came out of it was the audience loved Marta, and they loved her because she's a good person. Yeah. And that was across the board.
Yes, right there.
And it's probably gonna be a weird question because it's not a film set up to do that, but is there gonna be a sequel? Because I kind of want to see what happens after this. Like I want to see that family act under her.
The question is, will there be a sequel? Well, I don't know that I would do a sequel to this, but the idea of doing another mystery with Benoit Blanc, just different location, whole new cast, as I feel Noah's eyes burning into me. Whole new cast, we've talked about maybe he shows up just as a totally different character. We do that.
Do you have that eye patch handy?
Franchise with Trooper Wagner. I think the person next to you also had a question. Yeah.
The slowest car chase in the world. It had great comedy elements to it the entire time through, and I was wondering if it was a plot device to use the comedy to kind of show Benoit's comedic side to it as well, or if you just needed the chase because to move.
The question was about the car chase and it being slow.
Yeah, the comedy element of it was, to me, it kind of leaned into tonally where the film was all landing, and it also, I don't know, it felt like, this is what would actually happen. She's driving a shitty little car, and they're in these big cop SUVs. And also, I don't know, there have been so many great car chases, and I'm not gonna, in this movie, try and outdo what Edgar did with Baby Driver. So, and so to me, it felt like, well, let's go the opposite way, and kind of, so all those things.
All right. Yes, right there.
Yeah. The regurgitation.
Yeah.
At what point? Well, how did you come up with that idea? And at what point in writing the script did you decide to?
Yeah.
Did you hear the question? About the regurgitation, Marcus.
That was a story thing where I just figured, okay, we care about Mardo, she's in trouble. Her only tool to get out of this is by lying. So that's one thing I kind of took from Vince Gilligan, is you take characters you care about and make life as hard as possible for them. So the idea of giving her a tell with her lies, and then, she could blink twice, or she could touch her nose, or And I thought, well, sure, she could bomb it. Seemed like the most fun option.
Yes, right there.
You mentioned that it took 10 years. I assume because you were doing other projects as well, but how did you end up getting the movie made?
Ram, do you want to? Love to get Ram talking.
So Ryan started writing the script last January, and we wrapped filming by Christmas. So we basically delivered the script like end of August, beginning of September last year. Luckily, James Bond got pushed. We reached out to Daniel Craig. 2 days later, Ryan was sitting with him in New York, and Daniel had basically a window because of Bond falling, got pushed. So we had to start shooting 6 weeks from that moment on. So once we had Daniel, we reached out to MRC financiers. We have been talking about making the movie. They came through right away, and then the rest of the cast just came through. And 6 weeks later we were shooting, and 7 weeks later we wrapped.
Wow. The idea was germinating in your head for a decade.
Yeah, I've been chewing on it for a while, but that and a cup of coffee will get you. You guys, it's when you sit down and actually start working it out that it happens, I guess.
Yes, way back there. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about the knife prop?
Yeah. Yeah, the big knife-like structure thing. Yeah, that was something I ran it into the script. I thought it'd be fun to have like a religious icon made of knives back behind all of them, and so David and the Davids basically they came up with this. They found a big industrial barbecue grate and put all these knives on it. And then I remember on set we put the chair in front of it and we lined up the first shot with it. And I was like, oh, it's Game of Thrones. But I like Game of Thrones.
Okay, way back there, yes.
With a movie that's so dependent on like the puzzle pieces coming together, did any of those big plot details or story points come together while shooting or in the edit, or was it all in the script and you kind of just put things together as you thought you would?
Bob?
Well, I mean, the script is great, and I mean, most everything that's in there was how it was scripted. I mean, there are things that are rearranged, and there's some sequences that are not in the movie, but all the really difficult stuff, the stuff that you would worry about, that we worried about until we screened the movie, I mean, those things were built into the screenplay. And so we again, as I said before, we had an incredible template to work from. So all that really hard stuff was built in from the beginning.
What about things like the car that Ransom drove? It was a very specific car that seemed to suit him.
No, I had it written in the script, I think, as like an antique Jag, and we couldn't find/afford one. So we found it a lot. That was just happened to be like the coolest looking car of that type that we could find in the middle of Massachusetts.
So you shot the whole thing in Massachusetts?
Yeah. We're south of Boston, and I shot it all in a pretty tight span of little towns.
And then a couple of the rooms were on a soundstage, right?
Yeah, the upstairs hallway with the trick window, we needed specific geography for, so that was a stage. And then the attic office above that was such a tiny space, it made sense to do that as a build. And then the library downstairs is a real location, but it's in a completely separate mansion. So other than that, it's all around that mansion.
That's great. We have time for one more question? One more. Okay, so there was someone way back there. Yes, you.
Right here?
Yeah, you.
So that template that you have for a movie that's mechanical, when you're actually shooting it, how much of that was done in terms of specific storylines or tracking certain beats in order? And how much of that was like when you had it in your head, you had a certain template done, and you just had to be very, very meticulous about sticking to that script?
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, it's always nice when you can shoot in order. We had an amazing first AD, Jamie Christopher, and he did his best to make it all make sense, but we inevitably you shoot way out of order with all this stuff. And so a lot of your job on set is just keeping the actors oriented in terms of what pieces you're getting and where they're going to fit in the big picture. So yeah, you just kind of, you have to jump around. It's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Must have been challenging for the actors to remember like where they were, especially someone like Anna's character.
And those, when you're doing different flashbacks,
Right.
like all the things of her listening to the family, like making sure she understands not just like where it lands in the script, but whose perspective it's from. Very often it would be like somebody's telling the story of Dawn inviting her in, and they're all happy to see her, and the next time you see it, it's the real thing where he's inviting her in for the painful discussion, and like, so it's just a matter of keeping everybody keeping everyone oriented.
I love the scene where she's on the phone and you think she's just talking to, I forgot the character's name.
To Meg,
Yeah, and then she has she's very honest and open as she is. And then later you pull out and you see everybody standing, you have a whole different perspective. There's so many moments like that that are so great. Well, thank you so much.
Father, thanks for having us.